So the next step is I'd like to introduce somebody to you. And it's not our speaker, but it's a good friend, one of our many local economic developers who hails from Jacksonville and Onslow County, and that is Ms. Sheila Pierce. Sheila, you have the honors.
Thank you and good afternoon. I know many of you have already met Chris, an economic development veteran of 20 years, and was named the CEO of the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina earlier this year, January 12th. Chris holds a degree in economics and Japanese from The Ohio State University, where he obtained a master's degree in public policy. And I'm working on him to trade that red for NC State Wolfpack red, right, Chris? In 2007, Chris was selected to launch the Missouri Partnership, which focused exclusively on recruiting new business. Under his leadership, the organization was recognized by corporate executives and location advisors as one of the country's best economic development programs. He was dubbed a rising star by the Development Counselors International, which named him among the industry's top 40 under 40. Under Chung's leadership, the Missouri Partnership helped recruit 78 corporate operations that created more than 10,000 jobs and resulted in $1 billion in capital investment, and that's just since 2010. It included major projects by IBM, international auto supplier Yanfeng USA, and North America's largest roofing manufacturer, GAF. Previously, Chung managed $80 million in deal closing incentives and other related economic development funds used to attract, retain, and expand business in the state of Ohio. John Lasseter, the EDPNC board chair and president of Carolina Legal Staffing in Charlotte, has said about Chris, he's well connected to the industry and particularly good at nurturing collaboration between many players. I can tell you that we are certainly have high expectations of him from doing that. And I say that as one of the 17 members of his board of directors, along with Charlie Creighton here of Colony Tire. And we have already seen that he is a bright, engaging, incredibly energetic, and very, very committed to serving North Carolina and helping its economic growth. Please help me in welcoming Chris Chung.
Am I okay if I walk around with this? Great. Okay, I figured I've got a long drive on the way back home, so I thought I'd stay mobile and limber as long as possible. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Sheila, for the kind introduction. Appreciate the chance to be with everyone today and to be part of this special annual event for NC East. I'm not sure about the Ohio State red for the NC State red yet. I think someone pointed out this is ECU purple, so I think I did. Complete accident, but hey, I'll take it nevertheless. But I appreciate the chance to be with everyone today, and really what I want to do today is just give a very brief overview of the organization that I represent, the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina. I believe the title in our program is Transition of Economic Development for the State of North Carolina, and we are, as an organization, one of the embodiments of how economic development will hopefully be transformed long-term here in the state. So without further ado, I'd like to get into just the very basics of what this organization is responsible for doing and why it was created in the first place. Those are probably the two questions that I've found myself answering the most as I've made my way all across this great big state in these first few months on the job. As you heard, I just started in January, but even in that brief time of just over 4 months, I've had the chance to see probably all four corners of this state and really getting a chance to see what kind of a great place this is that we have the chance to help benefit through our work in economic development. So let me start off by talking about what the economic development work is that we actually do. Economic development, as you heard Sheila say in my introduction, I've been in this line of work not quite 20, but 17, close. So almost 2 decades, right out of school. It's the only career that I've ever known. And it's been a career path that I've really enjoyed because I think of the impact that this type of work can have on states, on regions, on communities. But economic development, what is it? I didn't know what that was 17 years ago when I started off in the field. To me, it was a fancy word. As an economics major, I'm not even sure I heard of the word economic development during the course of my studies. And it's something that I probably didn't know 6 months, a year into what I was doing in my first role within the field. But really, economic development it's about capturing private sector jobs and private sector capital investment. I think I was trying to describe this to a very young person the other day, and the analogy I was trying to use is, you guys remember the game Hungry Hippos? You guys remember playing this? So if you picture this massive field, little marbles, the white marbles that we're all trying to get when we play Hungry Hippos, if you picture each one of those as jobs or capital investment coming from the private sector, we want to grab our share of it. We actually want to grab our unfair share of all those jobs and investment floating out there. The problem is there's not just 3 other hippos on the field. There are 49 other hippos that we're competing with here in North Carolina. And we're trying to grab as many of those jobs and as much of that investment as we can and bring it into North Carolina. But how? How do you exactly go about doing that? And that's where I want to get into the specific work that this organization has been tasked with doing. So, I know some of you have heard me talk in the past, and I apologize that this will probably be very repetitive with respect to what I have to say next. Feel free to check your email, do a Sudoku puzzle, look at some cute cat videos on YouTube. You will not offend me because I know you've heard this before, and you could just as well deliver this up here. But the 5 functions that this organization have been tasked with are in this order. So business recruitment. The highest and most profile part of what this group is responsible for doing involves the attraction of new corporate operations to the state of North Carolina. That could be manufacturing firms, that could be corporate headquarters, that could be life science R&D operations, it could be information technology and software development firms, it could be food processing facilities, distribution and fulfillment centers, call centers. It's typically in that range of corporate operations. Those are the types of companies and facilities that we are trying to recruit to the state of North Carolina. We aren't focused so much on retail. We aren't focused on healthcare or educational institutions. We're not trying to recruit those types of opportunities here. Those are important, make no doubt. They're part of that economic fabric that make up any community, any region, any state. But we're really going after those types of corporate operations that have some pretty wide latitude over where they decide to locate, and hence it's operations like manufacturing and corporate headquarters, call centers, distribution facilities, and the like. So that's the first part of what we do, going out there and trying to position North Carolina as a place where these types of companies can expand and set up their new operations. And very much we're working closely with partners like NC East at the regional level and then local economic developers at the community level. It's the most high-profile part of what we do because, by definition, business recruitment tends to garner the most headlines. Anytime a community, a region, a state is successful in recruiting a new employer into the area from outside, that's a very high visibility type of outcome to see. Again, this week, you don't have to look any further back than Monday when Volvo announced in South Carolina their plans to put their first assembly plant in North America in that state. Obviously, only one state can win that type of deal, and South Carolina won it. And of course, they had a lot of fanfare nationally and internationally for their ability to win that big investment. So not all deals that we're competing for on the business recruitment front are that visible or that high profile, but that gives you a sense of why business recruitment, when states are successful in accomplishing that, it tends to be a very high profile type of activity. Everybody loves to cut a ribbon. Everybody loves to break ground, and business recruitment, attracting new companies, often ends up with that result. But that's just one part of what this organization is responsible for in terms of trying to facilitate economic development in North Carolina. The second, you might say, is actually more important than the first, and it's what are we doing to take care of existing employers and existing business that's already here in North Carolina. The companies who have already chosen to create jobs and invest in North Carolina, and what it is that we're trying to do to create an ongoing climate and base of support for these companies so that they can continue to keep their doors open and keep growing well into the future. In other words, we're just trying to take care of the companies who are already in our backyard and from which much of the job creation will likely happen well into the future. These are the existing customers for North Carolina. And you can imagine we're going to have a very difficult time attracting new customers, i.e. recruiting new companies to North Carolina, if the companies who are already here today find that they aren't getting the support they need, the resources they want, or the business climate that allows them to be as successful as possible. So before we can even be successful persuading a new company to set up operations in North Carolina, we absolutely have to do our utmost to make sure that the existing employers here are served as well as possible and feel like they have the support they need to keep growing well into the future. So that notion of existing business support, that's also one of those responsibilities that this organization now has. And we accomplish that through a field of regional offices based around the state with individuals who are in charge of going out there and calling on major employers and making sure that their needs are met so that those companies can continue to grow right here in North Carolina. So business recruitment, existing business support. The third area is in export promotion. And I saw John Hayes here earlier from the Free Trade Promotion Council. I'm not sure if he's still here. There he is, John. So John knows this very well. I had a chance to be at his group down in Wilmington a couple of weeks ago. But North Carolina is a great state for exports. $31 billion a year in exports are coming out of North Carolina. That's everything from agricultural products to aircraft fuselages. You go up to a place like Kinston, where I had a chance to be earlier this week, touring Spirit Aerosystems. They're making these very sophisticated components for aircraft and then exporting those overseas to customers in Europe. Agricultural products, aerospace components, automotive components, machinery and equipment, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, furniture, textiles, you name it, they all make up that $31 billion worth of goods and services that are being manufactured or produced here in North Carolina and then being sold to customers somewhere in Europe, Asia, Latin America, or somewhere else around this world. And that's $31 billion of sales going to a customer somewhere around the world and $31 billion of revenue that come back into North Carolina, that come back into our state's economy, that come back into the companies who have made or produced those goods. And those dollars circulate within the local economies and hopefully enable those exporters to continue growing and adding people to their staffs. And that's why it's very important that state efforts be in place to help more of these companies who want to sell their products around the world, enable them to reach those customers and markets where they can generate more sales and bring more of those outside dollars back into North Carolina. So new business recruitment, existing business support, export promotion. The fourth area is in the vein of small business assistance. There are a lot of great resources for helping individuals grow their business from 1 or 2 employees to 10 employees to 50 and hopefully much bigger than that in the future. You've got small business development centers housed at the community college network around the state. You've got small business technology development centers. You've got the Council for Entrepreneurial Development. There are a lot of wonderful resources that can help those small businesses craft a business plan or assess their markets or grow their revenues to the point where they become very successful employers. We're not trying to duplicate any of that within our organization. In fact, we're trying to leverage that infrastructure that's out there. But our part of contributing to small business formation in North Carolina is through something called Business Link North Carolina. And I think one member of our team from that group is here today, Chris Alsbury. Chris, are you here? Yes, right there, Chris. So Chris Alsbury is part of a specialized team within the Economic Development Partnership in North Carolina called BLINK, Business Link North Carolina. But it's a team of 4 individuals who field somewhere in the neighborhood of 15,000 calls and inquiries every year coming from an individual who wants to start a business here in North Carolina. It could be a cupcake bakery. It could be a yoga studio. It could be a machine shop. It could be some high-tech software operation. Whatever it is, it's an individual who wants to start his or her business here in the state. And our team at Blink is counseling that individual on any permits or licenses or documentation that they need to put in order and file to make sure that that company can have a successful start here in North Carolina. And of course, many of those individuals will be needing other resources and support as they take their idea and grow that into a fully formed business. And of course, what we want to do is refer those individuals to resources like the Small Business Development Centers, the SBTDCs, and all these other parts of that small business formation infrastructure. But our contribution to helping small businesses get up off the ground and hopefully grow and go on to be successful is through the efforts of that very small but very effective team at Blink that's helping individuals take those first few important steps towards becoming a small business. The last piece of what we do, so new business recruitment, existing business support, export promotion, small business counseling. The last piece, the fifth piece, is tourism. Tourism, I don't have to explain to everyone here how important tourism is to the economy of the NC East region. With a lot of the great attractions and natural destinations in North Carolina, this region is probably one of the most benefited from the tourism economy. And so our efforts at the Economic Development Partnership are involved in helping promote North Carolina for tourism and visitor spending. That goes beyond just marketing the state to individuals and families who are looking at where to vacation next. It's also teaming up with local CVBs to attract conventions, conferences, and major meetings. It's about trying to attract amateur sporting events and tournaments to North Carolina. It's even about things like film and TV production and trying to get as many of those activities happening here so that, again, we're trying to get those outside dollars pumping into North Carolina's economy so that those can circulate within regions and communities that benefit from that type of economic activity. So tourism, small business counseling, export promotion, existing business support, new business recruitment. These are the 5 major functions that this organization is responsible for. I want to take a moment to say what we aren't responsible for. One thing that many people may think is that we either make financial awards or that we influence public policy. We don't really do either of those things, basically because when you look at the different types of activity that this organization is responsible for, we are essentially a marketing and sales organization, and we are marketing and selling North Carolina as a place. On any given day, our audience could be a business owner or a corporate executive who's deciding where to put their next corporate expansion. It could be a family that's deciding where to take their summer vacation. It could be a meeting planner who's deciding where to host their annual conference. It could be a film producer looking at where they're going to shoot their next movie. It could be a buyer of products based in Asia who's looking at whether or not to buy a product from North Carolina or a product from somewhere else. We are essentially marketing and selling North Carolina as a place to all of these different customer audiences that we're responsible for reaching. But we don't get involved in things like public policy. We're impacted by what the legislature and what the executive branch and all these other facets of government decide to do with respect to the business climate here in North Carolina. But we aren't really spending our time day to day inside the state capitol trying to lobby for a specific outcome or a specific set of policies. When we go outside of North Carolina, when we try to reach these different audiences that we're responsible for promoting the state to, we're trying to make North Carolina the best option that that company or that tourist or that export buyer could think of, without any respect as to what's going on back home within the legislature, within the policymaking environment. We're basically trying to put the best possible shine on what North Carolina has to offer when we're out there engaging these different audiences. But like I said, when you look at those 5 different functions we're doing, it's very much in that vein of product promotion and marketing and selling North Carolina as a place. So that's a brief overview of what we do. And then let me spend just a few minutes on why this organization was created in the first place. Because as I said, that's the second question I'm probably asked the most often, at least in these first few months. This organization was created back in October of this past year. And as I said, I had the chance to join the team in January. My experience in this line of work, 17 years now, I guess going on 18. I spent my first 10 years doing this for my native state of Ohio. I was born and raised in Columbus, Ohio. I spent my first 10 years in economic development working on behalf of the state of Ohio in a public sector agency, the state government of Ohio, trying to convince companies to locate their operations in that state. I spent my next 7 years moving to Missouri and heading up their public-private partnership, a very similar model to what we've now created here in North Carolina, focused in that state on the attraction of new business and new corporate operations to Missouri. And now I'm here in North Carolina. So you might ask, the 5 functions I talked about, new business recruitment, existing industry support, export promotion, small business, tourism, marketing, aren't those being done by someone else, or weren't they being done by someone else before this organization was created? And the answer is yes. These 5 functions used to reside within something called the North Carolina Department of Commerce. It's a state government agency located in downtown Raleigh. And like many other states, this type of economic development work was housed within state government, within the public sector. But starting in October, North Carolina took the step that 15 other states have taken over the past decade or two in taking these economic development functions, lifting them out of the public sector and putting them into the hands of this public-private partnership, this nonprofit organization that I stand here representing today. And so the natural question is why? Why create this brand new entity when this work was being done already, but being done somewhere within state government? And having had the chance to spend a good part of my career in both a public sector, state government environment, and also a public-private partnership like the one I'm with today in North Carolina, I want to help everyone understand what those reasons are why this organization, I think, was created here in North Carolina. The biggest reason is leverage. We're a public-private partnership. What does that actually mean? In the context of this organization, we are now receiving every year from the state of North Carolina Department of Commerce about $17.5 million in funding. They're basically taking the same $17.5 million of funding that they were spending to perform these 5 marketing and sales functions, if you will, and now handing that to this public-private nonprofit. That's the public part of the public-private partnership that this organization represents. But now, as a nonprofit organization, we are able to go out there and secure financial commitments from a wide variety of private sector companies who are doing business here in North Carolina, who benefit from a stronger North Carolina economy. It's no surprise that some of our major investors to date include Duke Energy, PNC Bank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo. We've got utility companies, we've got railroads, we've got banks, we've got professional service firms, construction companies, real estate developers. A lot of these types of businesses benefit indirectly and directly when North Carolina is successful at growing its economy, whether that's through attracting more business, whether that's helping existing industry grow, whether that's helping small businesses form, whether that's through encouraging more visitors to spend their money here as tourists. All of these types of companies benefit if we are ultimately successful in our mission of advancing economic development in North Carolina through the work that we're responsible for. And that's why these companies have chosen to invest, and in many cases invest very generously in this organization. And why is that good? Well, it's good because it gives us more resources to go out there and do the work that we're tasked with. If our job is marketing and selling North Carolina, marketing and selling North Carolina takes financial resources. It takes money to go out there and consistently and aggressively reach those different target audiences that we're responsible for promoting this state to, whether that's on the tourism side, the export side, or the new business attraction side. And the more resources we have, the more effectively we can go out there and engage with those customer audiences that we're trying to influence in the course of our work. It's great that we have $17.5 million from the public sector, but now we can augment that with another million, another 2 million, maybe another 3 or 4 million in annual private sector investment, which again gives us a broader base of resources with which to go out there and market North Carolina to all of the different customers that we're trying to reach through our promotional efforts. And that's a great deal for the state of North Carolina, too, because they're going to be spending the same $17.5 million that they otherwise would have been spending when they did this work within the public sector, but now they're getting $19, $20, $21 million worth of work, worth of marketing and selling work being done for the same $17.5 million that they otherwise would have invested. And why? It's because they're able to tap into and leverage the participation and financial support of North Carolina's private sector. And I think that's why a third of the states in this country, 16 states now, including North Carolina, have chosen to set up these public-private partnerships. It's because economic development is too important for either the public or private sectors to go it alone. And that's why you're seeing this type of model emerge much more frequently at the state level. I think local and regional groups have had that figured out for a very long time. That's a very common model all over the country, but it's really in the past 10 years that many more states, including now North Carolina, have begun to go down that path, and we certainly will not be the last state to explore this public-private partnership model. There are a lot of other reasons that I think it makes sense for this type of model to be done in the performance of these marketing and sales functions. This isn't about public sector can't do things right and private sector is always going to do things better. It's not about that at all. I've spent time in both sectors, and there's good people and hardworking people in both, and there's bad actors in both. But I do think that within the public sector, you sometimes run into systems and processes that can make it a little bit more difficult to do the work of marketing and selling, which is fundamentally at the heart of what this organization is tasked with. And a couple of examples that I often like to cite from my time in the public sector was when budget times would get tough in state government or in the public sector. You would have something like a travel freeze. No employee could travel outside the state of Ohio when I was heading up that office. Try to imagine the type of work that we are charged with doing, where we're trying to convince an overseas company or a U.S. company to set up operations in North Carolina, or we're trying to get a travel agent or a tour operator in Canada to send their visitors here instead of somewhere else in the United States. Or try to imagine us finding a buyer or customer for exports coming out of North Carolina if we can't even travel outside of the state. And that's what you sometimes run into when you're trying to do this type of work from within the confines of a public sector system. Another area is in the realm of accountability for results and the ability to reward and incentivize people who are your star performers. For whatever reason, that can sometimes be a really tough thing to do within state government and within the public sector. Now, we have a 17-member board of directors, as you heard, most of whom are business owners or they come from the private sector, and they're individuals who are used to holding their organizations and their employees accountable for delivering results. But they're also accustomed to rewarding those individuals when they achieve their results. And having private sector funding and now the ability to reward individual employees when they outperform on their results, that's a greater degree of flexibility that I think can be very helpful to the type of marketing and selling work that this organization is responsible for. And then the last reason that I think states have gone down this path, I think two things are necessary for success when you're marketing and selling it. And I don't care what product you're marketing and selling. In my case, I'm talking, of course, about North Carolina as a place. But to be successful on the marketing side, I really think you need to have a consistent message and consistent marketing effort that's applied on a sustained fashion over the long term. You can't just be changing your tack every few years or every so often, because your message will never really get that chance to stick and resonate with your target audience. At the same time, on the selling side, we're in the selling business, and whomever we're selling to, there's going to be people on the other side of the table that we want to try to have relationships. Sales, it's a relationship business. So whether we're trying to sell to a corporate executive, whether we're trying to promote our tourism destinations, there's going to be a customer on that other side of the table that we want to have as strong of a relationship with as possible, because the stronger that relationship, the greater our odds of selling successfully. And so why do I bring these two things up? The need for long-term marketing message and the need for long-term sales relationships. It's because those two things can sometimes be very difficult to sustain when you try to do this work within the public sector. And the reason why? Administrations change. Governors change. Secretaries of Commerce change. When you have that kind of turnover at the top of an organization in any state, there's oftentimes the potential where your marketing efforts see wholesale changes, and then, of course, you're also disrupting any sales relationship that's been formed during the time of that particular governor, that particular Secretary of Commerce. Every state has seen this because every state will have that inevitable change within their state government. And so the idea being that if you can take these types of sales and marketing functions outside of the public sector, away from that inevitable turnover that will happen every 4 to 8 years, you're reducing that risk of that type being affected by that type of change, and you have a greater probability for a long-term, sustained marketing message, and certainly a greater probability for leveraging long-term, continuous sales relationships. And that's really the set of reasons why, again, a third of the states in this country have chosen to set up a model identical, essentially, to what we have now here with the Economic Development Partnership in North Carolina. The ability to leverage private sector resources, the ability to hold staff accountable but reward them when they perform results, and then the ability to weather the inevitable changes of administration that will happen in any state government in a way that hopefully benefits us in the long term with our marketing and sales effort. And that's why this organization was created, and not just here, but all over this country in 15 other states. So that's a little bit of the reason as to why. A few last details about the organization, and then if we have time, I'm more than happy to take any questions people may have about any facet of this organization. We're not a huge group. We've got 55 employees performing all 5 of these functions. So you can imagine these 5 functions cover a lot of ground, but we only have about 55 individuals. Most of us are based in an office in Cary, but we've got field offices based all over the state, primarily doing existing employer support, but we also have someone based right here in the Greenville market who's focused on our business recruitment efforts, a woman by the name of Donna Phillips. I know she's very visible in the community. Some of you may know Donna pretty well. So 55 employees here in North Carolina, and that's complemented by a network of 8 or 9 international offices that do everything from trying to recruit foreign investment from overseas into North Carolina. They're also trying to help promote North Carolina exports to buyers, distributors, and other customers in those markets. And then we even have individuals based overseas who are trying to get North Carolina on that list of visitor destinations for tourists who are coming over from those markets to spend their dollars somewhere here in the United States. And we want that somewhere to be North Carolina. So Canada, Mexico, the UK, Germany, Japan, Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Mexico City, and then lately Korea, which will focus on attracting new investment from that market into North Carolina. So that's the sum total of what this organization looks like. You heard that we have a 17-member board of directors drawn from all over the state, in addition to Charlie Creighton from Colony Tire and Sheila Pierce Knight from Jacksonville, Onslow County. Another gentleman by the name of Jeff Turner from Murphy Farms, Murphy Family Ventures, is also on our board. He's also from this general area of the state. So I hope that this 25-minute explanation gives everyone a better sense of what this organization looks like, why North Carolina decided to remake its economic development efforts at the state level, and what this new organization is responsible for doing. I can't be happier to be part of the North Carolina team. Having spent close to 2 decades in this field, North Carolina, to me, was always one of those states that I looked at as a competitor and thought, you know what, if I ever get the chance to go work for a state that, to me, from the outside, looked to be so successful, looked to have such a great quality of place, quality of life, I'm going to seize that opportunity if it ever presents itself. And I'm very lucky to say I got what I wished for. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done. As you can imagine, trying to guide this type of effort, especially a brand new organization, it's going to take partnership with a lot of other groups, including NC East, including a lot of local developers. I'm just really pleased to be part of the team here in North Carolina and really appreciate everyone's time and attention today. So happy to take any questions if we have time. But again, I just want to say thanks for letting me be part of this special day today. Thank you.
I'll let you go because they're asking you questions. No, sure. We do have time for questions. So one, I want to thank students may have to run, some of the others may, but we're actually a little bit ahead of schedule, so we do have time for questions. Anybody? Yes, sir. Chris has been brought to order. Really glad to have you.
Feedback from whom exactly? From companies?
Yeah, companies, what they say, good and bad feedback, how we're in a better position. The best source of that information is
The customer, right. Right, I agree. So when I said that we don't lobby, lobbying has a very specific definition, of course. It means you can't actually be out there saying this particular policy needs to be passed or this particular law needs to be passed. But what we can do, Miles, as you said, folks like myself, folks like John, I mean, we're out there engaged every day with the customer audience, especially on something like the business recruitment side. You could even look at things like film and TV production. We're out there engaged with that particular customer audience as well. And there are definitely going to be times when we're competing to attract a new industry or attract something like a TV production to the state. And unfortunately, there are going to be times when we come up short. There are going to be times when some other state ends up winning that deal or winning that production. And it's our job as a sales organization to understand why. And any good sales organization ought to be able to complete that feedback loop where they're taking that input from the front line, from the customers, and getting it into the engineers' hands. And in our case, the engineers really are the people who make the policy and write the legislation that has such an impact on our business climate. Our business climate, as you know, I mean, it's everything from the total of our workforce quality, our educational system, the quality of our infrastructure, our energy rates, our tax rates, our incentive policies. Those things all make up that sum total of what North Carolina represents to the business recruitment audience. And if any part of that product is coming up short or is the reason why we lose out to another state, then of course what we want to do as the sales team is help people like the legislature understand we keep losing deals for reasons X, Y, and Z, and until we fix X, Y, and Z, we're probably going to have to expect to continue losing deals for the same reason. Now, we have to stop short there. We can't tell the legislature how to fix that, but it is incumbent on us to let them know that these things are challenges that are inhibiting us from being as successful as we want to be. And hopefully, over the long term, that results in a better product that we can take out there to the customers that we serve.
And I'm wondering if you've had a chance to think through yet how you're going to identify your effectiveness that's specifically related to your activities so that you can enhance your own work over time.
Sure, great. In that case, we didn't actually have to do too much thinking. Unlike where we can't tell the legislature what to do, it doesn't quite work the other way around. So when the legislature crafted the legislation to set up this brand new organization last year, I think, I wasn't here at the time, but they were very specific in that legislation as to what those key performance indicators would be and what metrics we would be held accountable to. And I suspect those are going to look very much like the metrics that our board of directors would be holding our performance accountable to. On the business recruitment side, we're primarily going to be measured in terms of number of new jobs and amount of new capital investments successfully attracted to the state. On the tourism side, it's going to be things like visitor spending, state and local tax revenue that result from tourism spending. On the export side, it's going to be how many companies, exporters, did we assist through the course of the year, and how much did they incrementally grow their exports coming out of North Carolina. So it's pretty straightforward. All of our metrics align with what each of those 5 different divisions are responsible for doing. And that'll give us a pretty good insight into how successful we're being year over year.
Yes, good overview. So one of the concerns, we obviously represent the eastern part of the state, and the concerns of the dissolution of the partnerships and the creation of this new entity. How do we make sure that, or what can we do? And I know John's organization, NC East, is part of that solution. But how do we make sure that as calls come into your 55 employees, that we get a look? How's that process work so that the eastern part of the state benefits as much as the Triad and Charlotte and Raleigh?
Sure, great question. Well, first off, I can't emphasize enough that this field, economic development, I mean, at least in my close to 20 years. I mean, it's always been a team effort. It's not one single individual, and it's certainly not one single organization that's trying to do all of this. It really does take a concert of partners within the private sector, within regional economic development, within the local level. So we're going to be working with groups like John's, as well as all the local developers who are represented here today, because there are going to be times when we absolutely rely on them to help us on deals that we're working, and hopefully there are going to be times when we can be valuable to the efforts that they're leading at the local or regional level. But your broader question about how do we ensure that areas in eastern North Carolina feel like they get as much opportunity as areas in Charlotte or the Research Triangle, I think part of the challenge is we're going to be approached by companies looking in North Carolina, but they may initially be focused just on maybe Raleigh, maybe Charlotte, and sometimes there's going to be a good business case as to why they feel like they need to be located in those markets. I think in many cases, they're going to be focused on those markets because those are the only parts of North Carolina they're aware of. And they may not be aware of what other assets may exist around the state that would help that company to be successful with whatever operation they have. And for us at the state level, we have a big canvas to play with, so it behooves us to expand that playing field as much as we can to put as much of North Carolina into play as possible. And we certainly don't want to just sit there and, we want to respect what the companies ask us for when they come in through the door. But I think whenever and wherever we can, I want our team to be asking whether the company is willing to consider a broader section of North Carolina than what they initially come in through the door. And I suspect over the long term, we'll find that there are plenty of companies who are willing to take a look at a much wider part of the state than they initially thought they could, because they simply didn't know what other assets existed that could help them with their operations. So we're really going to be relying on folks like John and his local partners to keep us aware of any of those assets and resources, so that when we get those conversations through the door with the company, we can present other options outside of what they may be initially thinking of when they first approach us. And my hope is that that creates more opportunities for areas that feel like perhaps they haven't gotten a shot as often in the past.
Thank you. Roland Vaughn from Edenton. You mentioned in an answer to the gentleman's question from the back of the room that when the state is not successful, part of the job is figuring out the X, Y, Z's. Have you been on this job long enough, and based upon your experiences in other states, are you beginning to formulate some of the X, Y, Z's that need to be addressed? Because those of us who are elected people in northeastern North Carolina are more than willing to help with lobbying efforts, whereas it's not your prerogative to do so. We'd be happy to carry that banner if you could keep us informed of what you believe is needed.
Yeah, again, at 4 months, it's felt like a long time, but it's a very brief time. I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just, those of you who know my schedule know it's been ping-ponging all across the state, east to west, Murphy to Manteo, or Manteo to Murphy, however you want to look at it. So, yeah, I mean, a few conversations here and there with companies that have already chosen somewhere else besides North Carolina. And then, as John noted earlier, a big important audience for us on the business recruitment side are these repeat customers. They're advisors to the corporate site selection process. They usually represent about half of the deals that we compete for. It's a specialized consultant or an incentives advisor. I think they also are a good source of historically why North Carolina has maybe come up short. And so I suspect a few months from now, a year from now, I'll be that much more informed about what those reasons X, Y, and Z are. I suspect I already am starting to see what that pattern looks like, and then hopefully there's just those opportunities to engage with the legislature and engage with audiences like this to say, hey, here's what we're running into, and let's hopefully try to fix this over the long term so we stop losing deals for that reason.
Already in place strategies for engaging our academic and higher education programs, including our colleges and those. What are some opportunities that you feel are ripe in that relationship building with those sort of powerhouses that we have in the academic community here in North Carolina?
Sure. I don't think I have all the answers to that. I mean, to me, it starts with a conversation, and I've been very fortunate. One of the first meetings I had literally a week into the job was with North Carolina State. So there you go, Sheila. I did meet with State first. But, I mean, NC State's been a great partner already for us on some of the recruitment deals that we're working on. I met earlier this week with UNC's Keenan Flagler Institute, again, another potential great resource when we're working on any number of these functions. I've got a lunch meeting with Duke University. I've met some of the folks from ECU's hospitality management program. I mean, you're right, there are a lot of great academic institutions. It's just trying to figure out whether and when it makes sense to have them be part of that table, depending on the situation that we're trying to compete for. There's going to be times when that presence of a research university or a four-year university makes a lot of sense, given what that company wants to try to do here in North Carolina. There are going to be other times where maybe it's more appropriate to bring in the two-year community college because it's more of a technical workforce requirement. Either way, it's all part of just understanding what those different assets and resources are out there and figuring out when we can loop those in to help increase the odds that we can be successful winning that project.
I'm Bill Rich from Hyde County, and I just want to let you know that your tourism arm has already reached out to us. As recently as Tuesday, they were on Ocracoke, Heidi, and just gave a wonderful presentation. The information that you all have available to us in the East is very valuable, and I appreciate what you're doing.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words.
Chris, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Good to have you with us. Just checking. Chris will be around for a few minutes. He's got to be back in Raleigh by 4 o'clock. And if he drives like I do, that means he needs to leave about 2:45. So he'll be here for at least another 30 minutes. Actually, he probably has to be back to Cary. That is a little bit longer drive. Anyway, catch Chris. Park yourself outside the door right there. I'm a great guy. I'm sure he'd be more than happy to answer any other questions that you might have. You can find his email address on the internet. And he actually does respond. So the man works long hours, and I appreciate that. Just like I appreciate all of you having joined us today. Greatly appreciate the investment by Duke Energy in terms of one of our, I think, tremendous programs run by Steve Hill. Really excited about that and the impact it's going to have on Eastern North Carolina. So thank you guys again for doing that. Millie, look forward to working with you in your new capacity on our board. Thanks to all our sponsors. Couldn't have made it here without them. Again, Dominion, Duke, ECS, Electricity's MHA Works, Architecture, PNC Bank, and Transportation Impact. You guys are great. Keep doing good things for us. The other is, I think I asked all of my staff to stand up earlier, and I'd like them to wave their arms again. But the other thing I want to make sure you know is that we have 2 ECU student interns that work with us, between the 2 of them on a full-time basis, but they split it. So I want to make sure that you know who they are. So would they raise their hands as well, John? Way over there. Well, you motored across the room. And is Dominica still here? Or did she have to leave? Both folks with ties to Eastern North Carolina, we're thrilled to have them as part of our organization and working on our behalf. Again, the only other thing I'll leave you with is this. We want to hear from you. We want to hear in terms of ideas, something in terms of what you think we might do to further the cause of Eastern North Carolina. Again, something great that's happening in your community. Maybe on occasion we make a mistake. An individual is glad to bring that to my attention today, and I really do greatly appreciate that because information is critical, and that's a flow of information 2 ways. And we want it coming to us, and we hope we'll be able to communicate back with you as well. So go out there and do great things for Eastern North Carolina. Even those of you who don't live in Eastern North Carolina, we know you can help us, and we expect you to do that. So thanks again. Have a great day. Wonderful weekend. We look forward to hearing with you.